Good evening, I'm Joel Flynn in Hong Kong. Welcome to View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show. The government proposes to set minimum working hours and standard overtime pay for grassroots workers. Election officials may be disciplined as government apologises again for stolen computers that contain Hong Kong voters' personal data. And Panama deals major blow to Taiwan as it establishes diplomatic ties with Beijing. Taipei says it's angry and sorry. Grassroots workers in Hong Kong can now expect a minimum number of working hours and overtime pay. This after the chief executive in council approved a policy framework aimed at protecting them. At a press conference following the move, Labour and Welfare Chief Stephen Sui said companies that hire these workers, now defined as those earning less than $11,000 a month, will have to come to an agreement on weekly working hours and on overtime money. Employers currently aren't required to include such details in contractual terms. The government also plans to set up tripartite committees for 11 industries to discuss standard working hours. The proposals will be submitted to the Legislative Council for discussion next year and are expected to be implemented by 2021. But critics say the government should have written standard working hours into law.
During the discussion, we find that there's a common concern on the uncompensated overtime or the undercompensated overtime. I think that's both the concern of the employers and the employees, so that the Standard Working Hours Committee considered that we should accord our priority in dealing with this issue as the first step forward in the development of our working hours policy.
The government said election officials could face disciplinary action over the case of stolen laptops during the chief executive election in March. It unveiled an investigation report today that noted a number of inadequacies in security arrangements and the handling of information. The incident caused an uproar as the two computers contained the personal information of all the city's registered voters. Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Secretary Raymond Tam apologised to the public again and said there are mechanisms in place to decide whether the staffers involved will be disciplined. He also said the Electoral Affairs Office will stay vigilant to catch any potential voter fraud using the stolen information.
The Registration and Electoral Office has been instructed to monitor very closely about whether there will be any unusual submissions from any so-called electors to change their addresses or for, as you mentioned, vote rigging. But up to this moment, there is no evidence as well to suggest that that would happen.
But the IT sector lawmaker said he's disappointed in the government's response and said his professional guild will file a complaint to the Ombudsman.
Well, I think that obviously the buck must stop at the top. And I am very disappointed that the Constitution and Mainland Affairs Bureau appears to be trying to use the report to shift the attention, to shift the responsibility to the frontline in what they call the middle and lower ranking staff.
All rainstorm warnings were taken down this morning as Typhoon Merbok moved away from Hong Kong. But it was still a wet and windy Tuesday, certainly in my part of the city. We woke up to several weather warnings this morning, including the number 3 strong wind signal, the red rainstorm and thunderstorm warnings. In Stanley, a retaining wall collapsed, bringing traffic to a halt. In Ho Man Tin, residents were knee-deep in water. This taxi here found itself contending with floods. Close to 100 millimetres of rainwater was recorded in most areas around town. Rain is expected to continue affecting Hong Kong over the next few days. Taiwan's government says it's angry and sorry about Panama's decision to cut ties. That's after the Latin American nation established formal diplomatic relations with Beijing. Taiwan says it will now evacuate its embassy and technical personnel to, quote, safeguard its national sovereignty and dignity. Samantha Vadas has the details.
A big win for China and a major blow to Taiwan. Beijing on Tuesday welcoming formal ties with Panama after the Central American nation ditched relations with Taipei, saying it now only recognises one China and Taiwan is part of it. The move is the latest boost for Beijing's claims of sovereignty over what it views as a renegade province. China has been showering generosity on Central American countries in an effort to get them to break ties with Taiwan. And in a televised address on Monday night, Panama's President Juan Carlos Varela said his country had done just that and will form full diplomatic links with Beijing, a big customer of its vital shipping canal.
Panama and China are both developing countries, and we share values such as the importance of globalization.
Beijing says the two sides will work together on all things from trade to investment to tourism. The move leaves Taiwan with just 20 official allies, but the island state insists it will not compete with China in what it calls a diplomatic money game.
Pakistan has identified the two Chinese nationals killed by ISIS as preachers who posed as businessmen to enter the country. The Interior Minister says Li Jingyang and Mengling Si actually fooled authorities, went to Quetta to learn the Urdu language and preach. It also states their violation of visa rules contributed to their abductions. The pair were abducted by militants posing as policemen late last month. Islamic State has since claimed to have killed both of them. Attacks on Chinese nationals are rare in Pakistan, with strong ties between the two countries. To the latest in the probe into Russian influence in American politics, a Washington judge has ordered the Justice Department to make public within a month key documents disclosing communications between the Trump administration and Russia. This comes ahead of US Attorney General Jeff Sessions' anticipated testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee later tonight. The opening hearing will see him grilled over his meetings with Russian officials, as well as President Donald Trump's firing of ex-FBI Chief James Comey. For more on what's expected tonight, let's turn to New York correspondent Jade Barker.
Well, this has been an ongoing drama with several twists and turns, but we do know that Attorney General Jeff Sessions will testify in a public hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee this Tuesday. A Justice Department spokeswoman said Sessions requested the open setting because, quote, he believes it's important for the American people to hear the truth directly from him. Now, over the weekend, the Attorney General said in a letter that he would address matters former FBI Director James Comey brought up in his blistering testimony to the same panel last week. To refresh, Comey accused President Trump of firing him to try to undermine the FBI's investigation of possible collusion by people in Trump's campaign with Russia in last year's election. Comey's appearance also raised new questions about the Attorney General's relationship with Russian officials. In March, Sessions removed himself from the Justice Department's probe into Russian meddling, but he maintained he did nothing wrong by failing to disclose that he met with Russia's ambassador last year. Congress is likely to ask if there's anything else Sessions didn't disclose, why he wasn't forthcoming about those meetings, etc., etc. And some are also saying they expect tough questions for Sessions about his involvement in the firing of Comey, despite having stepped aside from any role in that Russian probe. So there's likely to be a lot Congress will want to drill the Attorney General about, and the fact that this is public will be huge.
OK, coming up next, the latest from the world of business with the other Joel.
Good evening. Well, Hong Kong's market has stopped a two-day slide, shrugging off more losses by US tech shares. The Hang Seng Index rising 0.56% to 25,852, propped up by insurers, banks and technology. Chinese biotech firm Wuxi had a debut to remember, surging more than 28%. But investors are keeping an eye on Washington ahead of the Federal Reserve's meeting, with expectations interest rates will rise. Now, Hong Kong has finally joined the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank 2 years after its creation by China. The bank, which was opened in 2015, aims to direct investment into continent-wide projects for things such as roads and railways. Following the purchase of shares in the AIIB in March, the SAR government announced earlier the final legal hurdles had been cleared. Financial Secretary Paul Chan said the accession process had been completed early and would allow Hong Kong's unique position to help the goal of the AIIB. Alibaba is in the midst of a sales push as it looks set to launch a new service in Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan and Hong Kong. The move by the e-commerce giant is an effort to try to find new users in the region. The service, called T-Mall World, will mean that overseas Chinese users will be able to buy goods from Alibaba's Tmall site. The company also plans on expanding elsewhere, especially in Southeast Asia, amid signs of a maturing retail market at home in China. Australian entertainment firm Crown Resorts has confirmed more than a dozen of its staff have been charged in China with promoting gambling. China said that 18 employees, including 3 Australians, were detained in October, though it's still unclear precisely how many of them have now been charged. Crown had been operating a strategy of trying to convince Chinese high rollers to come to Macau institutions it owned a stake in. The company has since sold its Macau investments and shifted its focus back home to the market of Australia. The Australian government hasn't yet commented on those charges. Now, General Electric, one of the world's largest companies, has named its next chief executive. Longtime GE staffer John Flannery will take over from Jeff Immelt, who's stepping aside after 16 years in charge. Flannery wasting no time in reviewing GE's business portfolio. But how much will he actually bring to the conglomerate? Fred Katayama reports.
General Electric's Jeff Immelt will soon step down as CEO, taking over John Flannery, who heads its healthcare business. He's been with the company for almost 30 years. He started with leveraged buyouts and later led the corporate restructuring group. He also helped turn around the healthcare unit. Immelt will leave the helm in August after 16 years in the corner office. Under him, GE sold off a number of its businesses, including the finance, broadcasting, and appliance units. It instead focused on higher margin service and software-related businesses and cut costs. But the company failed to deliver the profit growth as fast as some investors had hoped. Since Immelt became CEO in 2001, GM shares have lost a third of their value. Kevin Mon of Hennion & Wall.